Hi, I'm Alicia and I'm the playwright of Erik, and I thought I would take this time to share with you a little bit about the story of Erik and the evolution that it's taken, and just tell you what my plans are for it. Well, hopeful plans, because, well, anyway, um, Erik began in the fall of 2005 when I'd been introduced to the story of the Phantom of the Opera, and of course, I fell in love with the story right away. I read the original book by Gaston Leroux, which, if you haven't read it yet, you should read it. It's a great book. And I saw the different film versions. I saw the silent film version with Lon Chaney. I saw the film that was done in the 40s with Claude Rains, the one with Herbert Lom in the 1960s. And I just kept finding more and more versions of the story, and I said to myself, that would make a great show, because there are hundreds of fans of Phantom of the Opera out there, the different versions of Phantom, but if we put them all together, and told the story, the story of the lineage of Phantom of the Opera, that would make a great, musical. So I decided to write it, and I started writing, and after about 2 or 3 drafts of the script, I realized that the shift of the play was changing. It was going from focusing, it wasn't focusing on the films anymore, it was focusing on the life of Erik, of the Phantom of the Opera. Who was he as the Phantom? Why did he become the Phantom? And I had read different versions of the Phantom story, from the book by Susan Kay to different fan fiction that friends had written, that people I just came across that I'd written, that others had written, and they were all of them were, well written. Well, most of them were. I mean, there were some, but just a lot of them I just would say to myself, that doesn't seem like Erik to me, in my opinion. So I decided to figure out who was Erik the way I saw him, and figure that out, and then see where the play went from there. So I decided to sit down and write out who Erik was to me. And by the time I finished that, I had written a full-length novel about him. And so I said to myself, all right, I've got the novel now, I've got the book, I have the basic, structure of Erik's life, and now I need to figure out how to get that into the script. So I sat down and I went back to the old script, and I tried to work it back, and I tried to reincorporate it, and I just couldn't do it, and I was, hitting a brick wall. And I'm thinking, all writers go through a period where they're thinking, one day they're like, this is the greatest play ever, and the next day they're like, oh my god, what am I doing? This isn't gonna go anywhere. And luckily that came at a time in my life when I fortunately had the chance to go to a summer workshop in New York City for playwrights. And while I was there, a lot of my colleagues, my friends there, they said to me, you know what, you have so much great material that, you should, you can't fit it into a 2-act show. It's impossible. You can't fit all this great stuff into 2 hours. It's just, that'd be like, playing the show, sure, but like at fast forward speed and everything. So, well, I was like, well, what am I gonna do? I've got this material. How can I, work it? I've worked on it already for like 2.5 years. What am I? And they said, you know what? You should write it as a 3-act play. And I looked at him and I said, people still write 3-act plays. So I sat down and I wrote it out as a play. I completely threw out the script that I'd been working on, and I said, you know what, I gotta start this from scratch. I've got to, work on this, completely fresh, new, Microsoft Word document, new, approach and everything. So I worked on that, and it took, I don't know how long, I don't know. I just would lock myself in my room and be like, nobody talk to me, I'm writing right now. I was like Erik working on, Don't Want Trumpet. I'm like, I'm not hungry, I'm not thirsty, just, I'm writing, okay? I'm in the zone, I'm writing now, okay? So, I wrote and I rewrote and I rewrote again, and it got to a point where I was writing in my sleep, and after, God, I don't know, who knows how long, I finished the 3-act play, and it sat there. And it sat there, and it was sitting there, and sitting there, and sitting there. So I said to myself, okay, I've got the play, I've got the script, I've got the dialogue, the lyrics, I need a composer, now what do I do? And luckily, I think the muses were with me. I got the chance to volunteer at a local community theater where I had done a show a couple years ago. And a friend of mine there, she looked at the script and she said to me, "This is good." And hearing that, an objective opinion, that was great as a writer. I'm like, that's great, I mean, hearing that from someone who'd never read it before, it was just great to hear. And she said to me, this can't just be sitting here, we gotta get this on stage. And I'm like, okay, that's great, but how are we gonna do that? And she said, we will have a cold reading of it. I'll get people together. I know people, we can get this together, we can get this off the ground. And so that was a couple months ago, and so far we've had a reading of Act 1, which I think verified to me that, and not just because I wrote it, but it verified to me that this is good, it's going to be good, it's going to, take off. I can tell, once it gets, the finances it needs, once it gets the story, the financial backing, because you couldn't have the greatest play in the world, but without the financing or without, people to back it up, it's not going anywhere. So, just the future plans of it are just to get it on stage and hopefully, get the book. I've got the book. I've been sending, query letters like crazy out to, literary agents and publishers, and trying to find somebody who, picks up the book and goes, oh my gosh, we got to get this out there. Because I think just the story is, it's been moving for me because the story's been with me for 3 years now, but just for people, because it's not just the story of a man, it's not just a love triangle. The focus of Erik, for me, and being a person with a visual impairment, this is what jumped out at me, from, this, my perspective of it. It's not the story of a love triangle. It's not the story of, oh, this guy that lives under the opera house, he's, obsessed with music, he's obsessed with this girl, he's, a little bit crazy, But for me, it was the story of the symbol, the martyr figure who has to go on this, this, not really a quest, but has to be ridiculed by, society and by, people, and just, goes through all these things, and for society to realize, what? We weren't so nice to that guy, and it overall makes them better, better human beings and better people, but it's, kind of, for the person, they're like, oh, thanks, you couldn't have realized that, a little bit later, a little bit earlier. But so it's the classic, story, and I think that it's that fact of it's such a classic story and such a great story that it'll really move people and really help open the eyes of the heart. It's one of it's just a story that I think that really needs to be told, and a side of the story that hasn't been told yet, because the story is so often focused on, oh, the love triangle and all that, which is that, not that that's not important, but I just think that there's a different side to Erik that the world, hasn't really seen yet, and I hope to bring that out, and hopefully, put a little money in my pocket on the way. So that's the story of Erik, and I hope that look for it in bookstores or, you know, on stage, whichever comes first. And I hope you'll stay with me and come with me on the journey of Erik, because you're as much a part of it as I am. You know, without the audience, you know, the show isn't going to go anywhere. So stay with me, and I hope you enjoy the story. And if there's any literary agents out there, feel free to email me. And if you would just like to know more about the story, feel free to email me or just comment on this video, and stick with me. Thanks for watching. Bye.